Climate change is not something that's coming, it's with us now.
At the moment, we're flooding houses, and now with climate change, the more regular, intense, we're getting flooding.
We know that over the last about 100 years there's been around 30 centimetres of sea level rise, and in the last 15 years that's accelerated. There's a lot of landlocked ice, particularly on the Antarctic ice sheet, and as that melts it essentially adds to the volume of water around the globe. But something that's really important for us to consider here locally is after the Canterbury and Koukourarata earthquakes, that resulted in accelerated rates of lowering of land. So we know sea levels are going up, and we expect somewhere between 14 and 23 centimetres of sea level rise over the coming 30 years, and that we could see as much as 1 metre of sea level rise by the turn of the century. We also know that storms are occurring more frequently and that these storms are becoming more intense. To adapt to these changes, we know that we'll need to protect public assets and even consider moving some of these assets away from coastal hazards.
It's just one of many places in the harbour that has those values, and that's all contributing to the significant ecological value of the harbour as a whole.
We're really at the moment working with the coastal panel to work through and sort of critically discuss some of the different options that might be used to manage the risks.
So the Esplanade Reserve goes right up through here, and so that's 20 metres each side of the stream. So that not only is there a tidal wind from its high tide and storms up there, but also the high water from that large catchment that's coming down.
At the moment we're working through making draft adaptation pathways for each of the adaptation locations that went out earlier this year. Rapaki, Allendale, Teddington, Charters Bay, Puro and Koukourarata. The Specialist and Technical Advisory Group have kind of done some pre-work on what options are effective, feasible and decent for the environment. And in the coastal panel, they've scored the options from the values that we gathered from the wider community at the end of last year.
Access is key. We've got lots of small communities all around the harbour, but then we've also got that really strong connection to the sea, having access to the coast, being able to use the jetties, wharves, ferry services, walkways.
This is already more vulnerable now than Teddington Road is, with about 20 to 40 centimetres of sea level rise.
There's so much uncertainty around this, and nobody knows how bad this will be or how quickly it might unfold. While our focus is on the City Council assets, we're very well aware that there will be impact on people's private property and what services are available. Very interested to see how we go through this process and to reach outcomes that are good for the community.
This panel is really critical to the health of our harbour, to the health of our whenua, for future generations.
We try and take a flexible approach to climate adaptation planning because we know that there's a range of different future scenarios that we need to think about.
There won't be one option that's like a silver bullet. Different options can kind of work together over different timeframes, and options will have to be used in conjunction with one another. The Metro Maps can kind of show the trajectory that you're currently on and then the multiple options that you can choose from. You can do the short to immediate term one first and then move to the longer one, or you can jump straight to choosing a long-term option.
So one example of an adaptation pathway could be a low-lying coastal road. This road might be impacted by flooding and other coastal hazards, and over time those impacts might increase. So we'll have decisions about whether we can protect that asset and keep it in that place for longer, or perhaps we could relocate that road away from coastal hazards. Instead of basing our decisions on timeframes, we base our decisions on monitoring things like the rate of sea level rise and the increasing costs of maintenance. We call these things signals, triggers and thresholds. By monitoring these things, we can make sure that we act at the right time.
Shorter term, then probably looking at raising the platform level or perhaps having a floating pontoon next to it. So
I think with the solutions and essentially the recommendations for each adaptation location, we need to be flexible in our thinking. These are not set in stone. These are what we, the Coastal Panel, as representatives throughout Littleton Harbour, have thought are best for our community.
We want wider community input to make sure that the Coastal Panel's on the right track. They will take that input on board, share preferred pathways with the wider community again, and then put them up for a council decision.
What I'm thrilled about with this council, I like that we're not going too big, too hard and fast, being really methodical to do the planning really well.
We're making these adaptation pathways now, and obviously they go out to 100 years. We know that we'll have to check in as we go before we implement options in the future, kind of make sure that they're still sound and they're still what the community wants.
At our hearts is the voice of Whakaraupō in Littleton.
If we don't engage in our community, if we don't bring them along with us, we failed. We failed. If we're over here, the community's here, momo wa, waste of time, and we can't afford to do that.